Hi, welcome back to Memory Protection. It's an Apple News podcast set 20 years ago. Today, we're looking back to September 2000. I'm Josh McGrath, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Matt Smith.
Oh, Josh, hey, I didn't see you there. I was just over on vote.org registering for my absentee ballot.
Oh, shoot.
Have you requested yours?
No, is it really hard?
No, it's super easy.
All right, so I just go to vote.org. Oh, yeah, and look, here's a way for me to figure out whether or not I'm registered, and if I'm not, I can register. And I'm a little worried about going to vote in person, but it looks like here I should be able to figure out how to vote by mail in my state. Awesome.
Yeah, should be easy. Go fucking vote, everybody.
Go fucking vote.
Go fucking vote like your life depends on it. No follow-up this month.
No follow-up, so we're going to move straight into hot cocoa.
First item of hot cocoa this month, we're talking about an interview with the original Macintosh project manager, Jeff Raskin. This interview took place in April 2000 and was conducted by Alex Pang. He interviews Jeff about his time working for Apple in human interface design for the original Macintosh team.
Jeff is most famous for having come up with the idea for the Macintosh project.
Right. And the one-button mouse?
Apparently so. This is a fascinating article with lots of very interesting kind of esoterica, and it's a rare dissenting voice from an ex-Apple employee.
Yeah, I always find these articles really fascinating to read, and I know I've talked with you offline in the past about there was a great book that I was reading in grad school about. It was a lot about Xerox PARC, a lot about early interface and human interaction design. I think this era in computer history is so fascinating, particularly because all of these people working on this stuff were really just trying to figure it out from nothing.
Right. Yeah, inventing it whole cloth.
Yeah, and I would say most of that invention is still with us today. I don't think it's moved too far afield from a lot of the things that they were thinking about and experimenting with in the late 70s.
Yeah, for sure.
So we'll link this in the show notes. It's a really fun article. It's probably about a 20-minute read. It's great.
Next, Apple borrows Amazon's one-click ordering method. So I had no idea that the one-click button existed back then, and I couldn't figure out when it was invented, but in the year 2000, in September, Amazon did license the technology to Apple to use on their website.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing here is that Amazon trademarked and patented this, so Apple had to license the idea of a one-click ordering method on the web. That's maybe a sign of things to come in the mid-2010s when patent trolls are really a thing.
Yeah, although that said, there was a lot of controversy over this patent, and I think it's actually expired at this point.
It seems reasonable that shouldn't have been renewed.
Yeah, they had trouble with it here and in the EU.
I just thought that was interesting. That it was something that Apple had to license, and that Apple chose its first product for one-click downloading, iMovie 2.
iMovie 2. Gotta have it when you need it.
Our favorite iMovie. Oh, we got some big views on those iMovies we made.
Oh, really? I didn't actually. I didn't think to look.
No, we did not.
How many views?
7 each.
Oh boy.
Yeah, buddy.
Our deadlock continues. Next, a huge get for QuickTime.
Boom. Apple, Madonna, QuickTime.
It's what we've all been waiting for.
Yes, the trifecta you never thought was going to happen. But finally, Apple, Warner Brothers, and Madonna announced that Madonna's newest CD would be available from Madonna's website exclusively in QuickTime. The Mac Observer lists this as a major coup for Apple, though I Don't understand why.
And this is, of course, Madonna's album, Music. Finally, Macworld Expo Paris has taken place.
Oui.
Oui, je suis désolé. And that's right, we are désolé for not going in more into the keynote, but not a whole lot new happened.
So we got new iBooks, 3 new colors. We've got indigo, lime green, and graphite. The graphite is the new SE model, which you can also get in lime green. And the indigo and lime green are also just not the SE model. It was confusing.
And just a small spec bump for the PowerBooks as well.
Yeah, Apple's got some plans for the PowerBooks coming up in a few months, so...
Shh.
No. I'm not going to spoil anything. Don't worry. That's it. Hot cocoa.
That's the news. Closing us out, it's Sting.
With a cut off his new album. Take it away.
So we didn't want to spend too much time talking about Macworld, obviously, because we've already been to Macworld. But to go back to that event, one thing that Steve Jobs had promised us was the beta in the fall.
Right. And they released the Mac OS X public beta on September 13th. You could buy it for $29.95.
People definitely were a little surprised they had to pay for this beta.
Yeah, I think beta software has always been kind of a freebie for anybody that wants to sort of take the plunge.
Because, of course, the developer previews were not a paid purchase. But Apple wanted to charge you $29.95 for the beta disk.
For the privilege.
For the privilege of using this wonky, broken software.
So the DPs were freebies? I thought you had to have like a developer account for that kind of thing.
Oh, I guess just suffice to say you didn't have to pay any more.
Sure, it wasn't yeah, okay.
Yeah, you probably had to pay the $200 to be a developer back then.
Yeah, like $10,000 to buy a copy of WebObjects.
WebObjects. Listen, they got to move the volume somehow.
Well, that's neither here nor there.
Yes, so the OS X beta, codenamed Kodiak.
Kodiak.
No, sorry, that was a seal. I was trying to go for the bear, and it just came out a seal.
Oh, man.
I can't do it. I got nothing.
So the one bear-named Apple OS X product, Kodiak, we found a way to test this without damaging our pristine and precious iBook G3s.
Yes, Matt put in some time in the lab and figured out how to run the beta on a emulation program called QEMU.
I don't know if it's one word or if it's just QEMU or Q. I don't know. QEMU. I don't know. So we got this installed and we set it up and we played around with it for a little while. So we're going to talk about it now.
Yes. So a few disclaimers. Obviously, we're emulating the software on modern machines. So this isn't exactly a realistic experience. As Matt alludes to, we didn't want to mess up our iBooks with this because we're probably not going to be using it for very long. We'll probably move on to the subsequent versions of OS X.
Yeah. And while performance was fine, it's probably not accurate, and we couldn't get the internet or sound to work, so our experience was somewhat limited.
Yeah, which I bring up because, as we'll talk about later, there's some reason to believe the performance was not great in the beta.
Oh, buckle up, buddy. Performance for OS X is not great for 3 years.
So let's talk about the beta. When you first open it, there are some things you notice almost immediately.
Sure.
Now, Matt, you set this up with an account. Did you install any software, change anything at all?
No, I just did a plain install. That was one thing I felt bad about I should have probably set this up after I knew how to get this thing going so that you could experience the install as well. But to be honest, it really isn't. It's pretty, I would say, the core of the OS installation experience is the same in the beta as it is for most versions of OS 10.
Just a standard old OS.
Just a standard old OS.
Just stock Mac OS 10 public beta build 1H39.
Is that what it is?
For those playing at home. Yes.
I think it's us. And it's just you and me.
And the emulator is giving it 512 megabytes of RAM.
Right.
And it's emulating a PowerPC G3.
Right.
For what it's worth.
Yeah.
The first thing you notice is what, Matt?
The Apple logo in the middle of the the menu bar there.
Top center stage, the Apple logo. Now, this is not a menu. It's really just a graphic.
Yeah, no programs menu is ever going to reach the middle of the screen.
Yes, one immediately begins to wonder what happens when your program has like 10 menu items.
Well, I mean, they fix this by the launch, but it's a powerful choice.
Yeah, I wonder who made this decision.
You know that was Steve Jobs.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Center the Apple logo, center the dock, center everything.
They would do that today if they could.
Think so?
Yeah. Oh yeah, bud.
I don't know. So I did mess my my computer up a little bit here because there is an option in, now I need to find it, in the system preferences. Oh, hang on. There's an option to change the menu bar item from the name of the application to the icon of the application. Have you seen this?
No.
It really screwed me up. Okay, if you go to the system preferences and you go to general, there's an option to show application in menu bar using the application name or using the application icon. And I switched it to using the application icon, and it just ruined my experience.
Why did it ruin it? Because you couldn't tell what application you were on, or
because the icons are not readable at that small a size.
Oh, I see.
I think that's it's like the holdover from OS 9 where the application switcher was in the upper right hand corner, but there's no real context to that. It's awful. You see what I'm seeing?
Yeah, I'm seeing it now.
Are you loving it?
I am loving it. Let me just open up Address Book.
So I think there's all sorts of really interesting choices that are sort of like holdovers from, I think, obviously Next, where this OS originates from, and OS 9, where they're trying to pull experience from, while also then creating something new, which is OS 10.
Yeah, this version of OS 10 at least has a lot of transitional traits in it.
Yeah.
To going to use the metaphor of fossils and the evolution, like this is like an intermediate fossil. It's like a missing link almost. If you were to catch the OS 10 beta in the woods, it would walk away from you blurrily.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you'd barely be able to capture a screenshot of it.
There's a lot of things, and one in particular I want to get into later, that show this sort of these uncomfortable growing pains going from OS 9 into where they want OS 10 to be, but having people, give them feedback and sort of like pull them back from where they're going. So there's a push and pull.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a lot of holdover or carryover from OS 9 here as well. Like you can tell, right? Like iconography is not there. There's some OS 9 level icon designs that have not been updated. Sherlock as a whole looks like an OS 9 application.
Before we get too much further into this, let's kind of contextualize it a little more for the listener.
For the home viewer.
For the home viewer, yes. So like we said, there's the menu bar at the top with the centered Apple logo. It's very silly. You get you've just logged in. The main application is called Desktop. Mm-hmm. This is a little bit like the Apple menu that we know in modern day macOS. Desktop also represents Finder,
right?
At least in the beta. I believe it gets changed later on, but
yep.
Then There's no menu bar items and no clock.
Oh, that is something I didn't even notice.
Yeah, there's nothing.
There is a clock, Josh.
There is a clock. So go down. Actually, is it open when you first?
I think so. It's open right now. I think it opens on boot.
So there's a clock in the dock, and I was very confused because I also found it in the applications folder, which, by the way, you would get to by opening up a Finder window or a desktop window, if you will. And you might, for instance, find a row of huge icons at the top.
Yeah.
Bookmarks to...
It's like a top dock for your Finder windows.
It's like a top dock for your Finder windows. It's I would say it's analogous to the sidebar in modern Finder windows.
Yep.
So you have computer, home, something called favorites, apps, docs, and users. So you go to apps, and there's a application called Clock. Double click on it, and nothing happens. But it does show up in the dock. And what I didn't realize until later is this is a live icon in the dock.
Yep.
Do you know what these are called, Matt?
Widgets?
No, they're not.
What is it? Haunted doll watch?
That's right. It's time for Macworld Mac Secrets.
Oh.
Unexpected Macworld Mac Secret.
Oh, okay.
I was going through there's an appendix in Macworld Mac Secrets, 6th edition. It's all about OS X. I was looking for interesting things to say, and it wasn't a whole lot because it's one thing I'm sure we'll talk about is that, and we have talked about it before, is this version of OS X, even though it's weird, is really not that different.
I know.
There are some key differences, sure, but it's still, this is a new branch of the evolutionary tree that we are still on right now.
Right.
But I did find something. It's under a heading called Dock Extras. To compensate unhappy Mac fans for the loss of their beloved control strip, Apple slipped into the final version of Mac OS X a new mini application category called Dock Extras. They're application icons, charmingly called docklings by programmers, that do all their work directly in the dock itself. And they duplicate the functions of old control strip tiles. One lets you change your monitor settings with a single click. Another reports your battery charge. And another is for airport management.
Wait, where are these things?
I'll get into that. We expect this category to be better populated in subsequent Mac OS X releases. And already free or shareware docklings are abundant. So if you go online and search for docklings or even dock extras, there's almost nothing. So this is a sort of a rare treat, which is something that's like I've never heard of, and there's really not that much information on because it just sort of only existed for a little while. This is something that got kind of taken out and renamed in 10.1. And what they basically are like the text said, they're like the control strip items in Mac OS 9, but they're a middle step between that and menu bar items. So remember I said there's no menu bar. There's no clock or anything. Right. Yeah. They're trying to recreate that in the dock. So for instance, you have this clock, which is a functioning clock. You could have I've seen a picture of a calendar dockling. So you can imagine it. It's a desk blotter calendar. And then when if you have magnification on in the dock, as you scroll over it, it zooms up real big using bicubic interpolation. And as John Siracusa likes to point out, and it is, like you said, we would think of it as a widget now, but apparently it had its own category name.
Super weird.
It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the clock in the early versions of OS X, but I don't remember that the clock was its own app and that the app only existed inside of the dock, which is probably my faulty memory.
So if you go into applications, you go into grab bag, you can find battery monitor, and this is another dockling. But of course, it doesn't really work for us because we, quote unquote, there's no battery detected because we're not using a laptop. So all you can do is quit it. But again, there's not very much information. I found some evidence that there was a dockling for iTunes at some point.
Is that right?
And third parties did make them. It was a little bit like widgets, and that was like they would come bundled with applications. But it's just like this weird little category of things that just didn't go anywhere.
Docklings.
Docklings or dock extras. And just to close out, like my contextualizing, of course, you do have the dock is the other main component of OS 10. And for our stock version, it came with the Finder Face, Mail, Internet Explorer 5, Sherlock, Clock, System Preferences, our old friend QuickTime Player 4, and Music Player.
Mm-hmm.
That's all on the left. And on the right, you have one of that like weird @ spring icon. I never really understood what that is. I guess it's a link. And then a README and the trash. Yeah. So it's what you would expect from the dock. These are normal icons. They're not the weird, like full bleed icons from the original OS 10 presentation.
Yeah, it looks much like the dock
would for years.
Yeah, right. Some dope pinstripes back there.
Yeah, lots of pinstripes. This is the pinstripe age.
I think a couple thoughts. I think particularly on the iconography, it's interesting to see how Apple is sort of discovering the new visual language they're trying to come across. They've got these, the Mac man. I don't know what he's called.
That's what he's called.
Is it?
No, but
that's what ours is called.
Oh man, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I need you to go to applications right now.
Yep.
And go open up address book.
No, I'm going to apps.
Sorry, go to apps.
Yeah, address book.
Go open up address book. I'll show you some Mac men.
Oh my gosh. So Josh had me open up the address book, and the icons look like they're from Mac OS like 7.
They look like they're from like 7 different OSs. Like
that's true.
There's like 2 of them look like they're from Next. A few of them look like they're from OS 9. And then there's these 2 that have like, they're called New in group, and they have half of the Finder Face guy, but with like flesh tones.
That's weird.
He has become human. Oh, MacMan has assumed the mantle of the flesh.
It's weird bean people.
They're very upsetting.
Yeah, it's really strange. We'll put some screenshots in the show notes.
I love them very much.
Yeah, so the icons, to be fair, like they're trying real hard, but the iconography is really all over the place. They haven't quite figured out, like they're trying to go for like this realistic, it's not even skeuomorphic. It's just realistic in most cases here. Clock's a clock. I guess it is skeuomorphic, isn't it? The Mail app is a stamp. Sherlock is a Sherlock Holmes hat and a magnifying glass. But they kind of range from like the Mac Man being sort of really illustrative and, aqua-y to really realistic. I think like that Sherlock hat is probably just a photograph.
And on the other end of the spectrum, you can still find plenty of sort of OS 9 style graphics.
Yeah.
If you look around. This one's not exactly a fair example, but the beta comes preloaded with Stuff It Expander, and that's just straight up a old pixel icon.
Oh, yeah. Classic. Yeah, and I think we'd see this for a while where people didn't quite know what to do. I think especially if they were still heavy into OS 9.
Well, it's fun because there's lots of things like this that remind me of the current transition we're going through with Big Sur.
Sure.
Which is also making a demand on icon designers to change how things work.
Round recs everywhere.
Round recs, but also you can break the round rect if you want to.
Yeah.
And you can imagine like this, there's going to be plenty of holdouts who just don't bother changing, and it's going to be all over the place for a while. And then you even have things like in Big Sur, like the bad battery indicator for a while.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. They're figuring it out as they go. And you're going to be buying $29.95 beta software here, so you kind of know what you're getting into. You should.
What does that mean?
You're going to be testing beta software, so stuff that does not look right or is broken is par for the course.
This isn't that $100 software.
Right. Exactly. My only other thought is regarding the music player. Did you play around with this at all?
So this is an MP3 player, right?
MP3/CD player.
Ah, yes. And what you get when you open it is
you get two windows. Strangely, you get the spaceship controller window, which has your playtime and presumably like your ID3 information on a fake virtual screen, as well as your play, pause, skip, eject controls. And then you have your playlist window, which is where if you have a CD loaded, it'll show you the tracks. Or if you have MP3s loaded, it will show you the tracks there. And then there's a shuffle button and then add and remove for MP3s. I thought this was great that Apple included it, but I also was curious if this is, like, knowing iTunes is coming out next year, if this is some of Sound Jam in here to try and sort of prepare people.
Oh, that's a good question.
And I didn't have an answer to that. I did a little bit of digging, but I didn't see anything. One interesting thing I want you to try, and I don't know if you did try this, but go to the desktop, make sure desktop is selected.
Okay. I think yeah.
So desktop menu item showing up?
Yeah.
Now hit Command Q.
I love this. So I found this out because I went to desktop and I went to About This Mac because I wanted to see About This Mac. And then I didn't want to see About This Mac anymore because I knew all I needed to know about this Mac. And so I pressed Command Q. And what happens?
Apple has mapped Command Q to logout, which prompts you to log out or shut down or cancel, which I thought was an interesting choice.
Nailed it.
Not the choice I think most people would expect to be making.
I was like, I was laughing at this, and then I was like, okay, I just got to double check this. So I went in Catalina and tried the same thing, and it just closes the window.
Right.
But then I was like, how do you shut down the computer?
That special menu's there.
Oh, the special menu is still there. It's a holdover from OS 10, from OS 9. So one of the problems on the show is, as much as we have the benefit of hindsight, we don't always have context. Yeah,
I think my experience of Mac OS is pretty new at this point in time, and Josh had just been born, so.
Yes, I was still in the breeding pits.
Ew. Were you a fighting Uruk hai?
Yeah, I was in Orthanc being bred. I could really go for some man flesh. So, yes. So I have not used very many versions of macOS before this, other than my limited experience with OS 9. And likewise, haven't had much experience with the subsequent versions of OS 10.
Yeah.
Other than, really starting with Leopard.
Right.
So it can be a little difficult for us. Let me put it like this. Sometimes I hesitate to say, oh, this is weird, or this is different, or I'm not sure what is in the beta. What in the beta is weird and is going to change, and what is something that is actually just in OS 10 for a long time.
Right. Or even what is weird and why is it weird, right? Because it could be weird for a few different reasons.
Right. And while we could go through every single version of OS 10 and really check in on that and do actual work, the fun of the show sometimes is not knowing, so that we kind of experience it as it happens.
Sure.
So we do sort of take it from that perspective a lot, but it would be nice to have someone sort of hold our hand through it sometimes.
Yeah. So we brought somebody in this month.
We wish.
Yeah. So I think I just want to say that one of the things that the two of us have been looking forward to is sort of going back to John Siracusa's old OS 10 reviews. And this is the first opportunity that we've had so far on the show to sort of dip into that world.
Yeah. And to know, we do know that he did reviews of the developer releases, previews.
So we weren't doing that.
No.
We got bigger fish to fry.
Here's how I look at it. This is the first public version of OS 10.
Right.
And the first review of that by John Siracusa of a public OS 10 version. So that's where we're starting.
Yeah. If anybody's not familiar with John Siracusa's OS 10 reviews, they are exhaustive. I think, to say the least, this one on Ars Technica is 16 pages long.
That's a kind of a short one, I think, even.
Yeah. And that may be because this is iterative from the developer previews. But it does have some good information in it.
Usually the style is that each page is a sort of self-contained topic. Ranging from getting you up to speed on what the changes are in the beta versus the developer previews, talking about performance, all the way into getting into analysis.
He starts off by telling us what he's testing on, and he's working on a G3, blue and white G3 tower, and a cube that was lent to him, and he installed it on both of these to test and see how the performance varied. He goes into all of the sort of details that you would maybe want to know about at the time, right? Like how does this operating system sit on top of OS 9 or sit alongside OS 9? Does it all work?
Yeah.
How does that work? What's it do to my system?
When I say that we don't always have context and we're looking for context, that's why we read this review, because Siracusa comes at it from a perspective of, is this change, this shift from the classic Mac OSs, if you will, is it worth it? Like, is the price we're paying being paid for by some commensurate or even greater value? And I would say that on the whole, he is not sure about that.
Yeah, and I think that is sort of the prevailing thought of the time, is whether or not OS 10 is a step forward for the Mac. And I think everybody loves the multitasking and the sort of stability. But I think out of a couple, I don't know if John mentions it or if it's in that Raskin article, but they mention that using a Unix system was seen as a step back at the time.
So we had mentioned earlier that Jeff Raskin is a little bit critical in his interview. Here's a quote. The interviewer Pang asks him. The interviewer is talking about why Apple didn't get into the internet sooner. And sort of asking Raskin why people at Apple didn't get it.
Yep.
The people in charge at Apple, and I think Jobs is one of them, were not visionaries. He's always been called a visionary, and I've never seen that in all the years I've worked there. Being a visionary is not what he's great at. Look at OS 10 that Apple's coming out with. Everybody who works on it says it's a throwback to the 1970s in terms of structure. It's Unix. It's backwards. So as you're referring to, I guess this would have been seen as, well, kind of anachronistic almost.
Yeah, I think it may be sort of jarring for people who maybe lived in this world and thought they were getting away from it. And I mean, lo and behold, at least 50% of the world runs on Unix or Linux or that kind of system right now.
Yeah, and then to go forward to Siracusa, he says, I hope Apple thinks long and hard about the trade-offs made in beta. I think even the most hardcore GUI eye candy fiend will admit that a certain minimum level of responsiveness is necessary, no matter how good something may look in screenshots. So, of course, OS 10 looks pretty amazing in demos, because what you're coming from is Platinum in OS 9, and that was it's a huge shift in the visual language. Mm-hmm. Much in the same way that Big Sur is a huge difference from Catalina.
Right.
While it's visually impressive, once you get to the beta, one of the big concerns that Siracusa brings up is performance. It's not very performant. And they make a lot of changes to basic user experience paradigms that had been established in macOS for over a decade at that point.
Yeah. And that's difficult to get used to. I think even doing software testing for the podcast month to month, like having used OS 9 last month and using OS 10 this month, it is jarring and it is a shift.
Yeah, you have the obvious things like when you open up a folder, it doesn't open up a new Finder window. It opens within the same Finder window.
Right.
Granted that you have that setting set up, which is the default.
Yep.
But that new browser style finder was a huge selling point for macOS. But if you're looking at it from Siracusa's perspective, this is breaking something called the Spatial Finder.
Yeah, and I think there's maybe a little bit more to that as well, because I know that Windows also went to this kind of window navigation system, and I don't know what version it was. Maybe, it might have been 95. I don't know, but the back forward, single window navigation idea was not necessarily new and was kind of making the rounds. But I think this was maybe a step too far for Apple. And I mean, Apple also recognized that and gave you the option to change it. And I think even to this day, it's not the same anymore. At least mine isn't. I don't know how yours is set up.
What do you mean?
When I open up a new Finder window and I double click something,
it's still like I guess it opens in place.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's all I've ever known.
Yeah.
So it's a break in user experience for graybeards.
Ooh.
But I mean, it's interesting to bring up because as much as Siracusa really rails against this, and if you follow him over the years, he talks a lot about the Spatial Finder. And just to make a note about that, that's this idea that where you, the user, put something in the Finder and where you put Finder windows is inviolate. It does not change unless you change it.
Right.
So
right.
If you want to have, a big, tall, thin list on one side of your screen and a bunch of windows over here with pictures, those are in icon mode, these are in list mode, those all stay where they are. And every time you click on something, it opens in a new window. If that's already open, it brings it to the front. There's only one version of something, whereas in this new version, the default really breaks that. And the point of the Spatial Finder, the theory behind it, is that you offload a lot of thinking about how to find things if you visually know where it is on the screen and can depend on that. It's a trusted system. And I know Siracusa has talked about this a lot over time. It's, I think, something it's one of his bugbears. And it's interesting to hear him talking about it 20 years ago. And I've heard him talk about it, months ago. And the reason he's still talking about it is because like you say, Matt, this version of the Finder we're looking at in the beta wins. It's still what we have today. Right.
And I don't know how you feel about it, but I kind of miss OS 9's Finder.
I can't miss it because I never used it.
Well, I do. I mean, you've used it now. I mean, you can still have a preference, but
I have no habit. I have no mental model for a Spatial Finder. I've always lived in this madness world.
Sure.
So it's not weird to me.
Yeah, I think it was not something I had really thought about up until now, to be honest. But going back to OS 9 and having those windows stay exactly where they are for my entire browsing experience, like to some extent, I think is a step. It's a step back coming from OS 10, but it is also sort of like a step forward in terms of that spatial recognition, knowing that something's there and will remain there when I need it. I know there's something kind of nice about that.
Siracusa references a man named Bruce Tognazzini quite a few times in the review. And Bruce was the founder of the Apple Human Interface Group. Now, at this point in history, he's no longer working at Apple, and he has a weblog, which we've actually referenced before in the show, where he talks about issues of human-computer interaction. But he's got a great quote in the review where Bruce says, "With the Mac, you've always had the power to move around and organize applications and documents in your own virtual space, maintaining a neat or cluttered workspace as is your habit. Other desktop systems, from Windows to Unix, have depended more on abstraction, forcing the user to remember the location of objects in complex hierarchies. In theory, all of this has reduced clutter, but it really only moved the clutter from the visible desktop to the back of your mind. Since most of us work better with visible clutter than rote memorization, our efficiency drops." So, his main argument here obviously is the clutter goes somewhere. And what they're saying is on the screen, it's better because it's not in your brain. It's not one more thing for you to think about. And I had never really thought about that, whether or not it would be, because I live in a world of minimalism, where I try to have fewer screens on screen, if you will. Obviously this is this is informed by iOS, where you can only have one application on at a time, or maybe two or three max on the iPad. We've really moved away from that over time.
Yeah, and I think those things. I think that paradigm, that single app, single window paradigm, works well on the phone, but that is by the virtue of the size of the thing in your hand. And I don't think it works well on the iPad. It works, and they've figured out a system, but it's pretty confusing. I don't know how you feel about it, but like multitasking and multi-window stuff on the iPad, still not great.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's sort of a whole other issue, right?
I mean, I think it's the same issue, right? Like how do you manage your interface, right? And Apple does not make it easy, because every single app can have a different set of layouts and different set of windows that aren't shared by other apps, unless you're doing the flyover thing, in which case they are, but you can't see all the apps in the fly. You know what I mean? Like the spatial awareness of your multi-window setup on an iPad is, I think, even far worse than it is on OS X. And rather than doing the logical thing of giving people the ability to control when and where windows exist and position themselves on the screen, Apple's sort of forcing your hand into this full screen, half screen flyover or nothing.
Interestingly, on that note, one of the headline features which we had described before for OS X that Jobs actually demos is a single window mode. Yeah. And that has been taken out.
Yeah, which I thought was an interesting thought. I know that was sort of like a curiosity for us several episodes back. I was kind of hoping to try it, and it doesn't show up here.
It's already gone.
Yeah, sorry.
So maybe that's evidence that there is an internal debate about these issues.
Sure.
And Siracusa has a lot to say about spatial problems with the OS. One that sort of blew my mind, because I'd never really thought about it, was his problems with the dock. His like sort of fundamental issue he has with it, which is that it's centered.
Not having thought critically about these things at the time, it's not something I think about now at all. But it's a really good observation. What does he say?
Okay, so basically the problem is, even though you get to decide where icons go, because the dock moves and grows and shrinks and it's centered, those things, where those icons are in space, changes. So you can't rely on them, and so your brain has to do more work to find them. And that made me wonder if that's part of the reason I don't use the dock more.
Is that I use the dock a lot. It is my primary tool for organization for my applications. And it growing and shrinking has never bothered me. And I wonder if, because the only sort of like analog to the dock, and I know it's not a one-to-one, is sort of the control strip. And the control strip behaving the way John wants something like this to behave. But I guess I've never thought of the dock as anything like that. I certainly see his point, but given that I think Apple has always positioned the dock as a transient piece of user interface, I don't think that I expected more of it in that regard. But I mean, I think the point stands, right? Like, yes, if you want to build a model for something in your mind, and you know that this icon should be here, but you've just minimized 5 apps and now it's 200 pixels to the left, certainly that's confusing.
I don't use the dock to open applications.
What the hell's wrong with you?
I don't know. My brain doesn't go there. I either use Launchpad. I use Launchbar. It's about all I use it for. I'm a very sad power user.
Wait, Launchbar or Launchpad?
I use Launchbar, which is a third-party application switcher. Okay. Or I use Spotlight. Yeah. And then I use Command Tab to switch between applications.
Yeah, I do that. I have my model, right? I have my mental model for the way the dock works.
Yeah. The only thing I use the dock for is minimized windows.
Yeah.
Really. And even then you don't control where they go. So I don't have it's not like a trusted system. Now I'm like, now he's like he's put this bug in my brain. I'm wondering if like this is the reason I don't really use the dock, is because I feel like I can't rely on it.
Yeah. I think it's worth more scrutiny.
I don't know where anything is.
Yeah. I think Apple tries to maybe alleviate some of this pain a little bit more by allowing you to position it left and right on the screen in the future. I don't know that that is better necessarily, but at some point, the vertical constraints of the dock prevent it from growing any further.
Reading Siracusa talk about all these things, it's sort of starting to remind me of something from our time, which is John Siracusa has a few Mac applications.
Yep.
And one of them is called Switch Glass. And this is something that he made last year in 2020, I believe. I'm sorry. No, wait, he released this in February of 2020. This is a dedicated application switcher. And it's something that you position on the screen discreetly and only handles opening applications. And I was reading through his FAQ for why he made it, and here's his explanation. The macOS dock does show an icon for each running application and allows apps to be brought to the front and hidden, but the dock also may contain other things, files, folders, recent, but not currently running apps, plus the trash can. The dock is also centered on the edge of the screen and has limited appearance options. It cannot appear in different positions and sizes and different displays, and it always brings all windows from an app to the front when an app icon is clicked. Switch Glass is for people who want an interface element dedicated entirely to application switching, with a customizable appearance and location for each attached display. When used alongside the dock, Switch Glass provides a second target for mouse-based app switching. With the dock hidden, it provides an app switching interface without any clutter from the other functions of the dock. And we haven't talked about it yet, but he also talks about in this review for the beta about people having confusion about what things go in the dock, whether it's just applications and where do files go, and that's where the divider line in the dock comes from. It's actually people complaining about that, but even then he says like this just like muddies the sort of the concept of the dock, and so I see this as like 20 years later. Him still being mad about this.
Yeah.
And so he makes an entire application just to solve some of these problems.
Right.
You know, I think he expresses it a little bit differently 20 years later, but you definitely, I think this is something he's been stewing on ever since.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also he's got the other one, the, what's it called?
Front and center.
Front and center, which I actually use and I actually really like.
Remind me what that one does. I don't have either.
So when you click on an app's windows, it brings all of the windows in the app to the front, not just the one that is clicked.
That actually sounds really good.
Yeah, it's really good. So yeah, I do use that one, and I played with the Switch Glass, but I haven't really gotten into it. I think maybe because the dock works just fine for me. Yeah,
and ultimately that's how I feel as well. Like I've been saying, it's just one of the great things about Siracusa is he makes really good arguments about things I've never thought about. And he's very persuasive. Unfortunately, I'm already like inoculated to the bad way of doing things. so to me, it's not bad. It's just how you do things. And while I agree, like it probably could be done better, there's like more. There's a purer way to do things, a better way to do things. And it's a funny thing about user experience design and product development. You actually, I'm realizing this more and more as we go on with the show, is like products and Apple products in particular are never perfect, and sometimes they're really imperfect. In these really fundamental ways. Or at the very least, people like Siracusa and Raskin are pointing out like the ways that this could have been better, but it kind of doesn't matter.
Right.
Like these are still like, these things still survived. They still are what we're using today. And I'm not saying that's not an argument against progress. That's not saying that we shouldn't try to make things better, but I think it is interesting how long things can go and be kind of like just fine.
Right.
And I don't really have a point to make here. It's just, it is an observation I'm making more and more over time.
Yeah. And I think an interesting thing John mentions in the conclusion, I'm just going to read a little bit. He says, I want to like Mac OS X. I want to use it as my primary operating system when it's released. I'm tired of applications bringing down the entire system in OS 9, but technical merit is just one part of what makes an operating system, and it has historically been a very small part of what defines the Macintosh experience. And I think that's a really good point, right? Like, I think John is focusing a lot more here on the experience than the actual technical merits of the operating system. I think another thing he goes on to say, he says, if you care about the future of the Mac, I strongly suggest that you tell Apple how you feel, right? As much as people sort of bemoan that, like, Apple's radar system, like, from what I understand, people do read them. People do respond to them. Maybe not as often or as frequently as you'd like, but I would wager that John has probably molded some aspects of Mac OS X that we don't necessarily know about, right? Like these reviews he's done over or will have done over the next 10 to 15 years, I'm sure have some effect on how OS X is perceived and thought about within Apple.
Yeah, I'd bet good money that at least in this era, pointing out problems with performance, being one more voice, pointing that out, probably helped.
Right.
It did take a long time, but Mac, OS X did eventually become, if not zippy, better than what it was in the beta.
Sure. You don't think it's zippy now?
It's pretty zippy for me. Depends on the machine, right?
I got a brand new machine. It still takes about a second for a window to open up. I think there's a lot more here to sort of sink your teeth into. I mean, not just because we do a podcast about this stuff, but I think later versions, little feature updates here. I think it's good to, or I mean, it's not good to see, but it's fascinating to read how this shift from OS 9 to OS 10 was perceived at the time. And while I think, true to his name, he's hypercritical about a lot of the aspects of the operating system. But I think he ends that article on a note of optimism, right? He wants to like it. He wants to use it. I think he thinks of it as the Mac. It is Mac-like enough, right? It is not distinct. It is not too far afield from what he's familiar with to walk away from it.
We're alluding to earlier, I'd say Siracusa's main, I think he said something to the effect of, when defining hypercritical, it's not just the point isn't just to be critical. The point is to point out how good something could be because you love it and you want to push it forward. And I think that's always been the aim of these pieces. And, and he doesn't write them anymore. He stopped in 2015, I think. He wrote these for years. And like you said, like, for the most part, they're incremental. But they're never any less detailed than this one.
Right.
And for as much as you could say he gets in the weeds, he's always has a reason for it. There's always something he's trying to tell you.
Right.
And he always makes it pretty entertaining. And this sort of context, as I said, is something that's really invaluable to us. Because, and it's why I was really looking forward to reading this, because I knew that he was going to help me understand something I've been very curious about, which is, what was it like on the ground? What were people who are like longtime Mac users, how were they feeling? What were their anxieties about the new direction things were going in? And, how were they going to take it? And what was worth the change?
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, at this point in history, I stick with OS 9 for at least another year. I don't remember if I think I installed 10.1. I never went with 10.0 because I heard it was a bit of a mess. So yeah, this is great context. I think in addition to being able to test this public beta, and to be honest, we're talking about how fast the operating system is or how snappy it is, right? Having used OS X for 20 years at this point, or 19 years at this point, the beta doesn't feel as sluggish as I think everybody thought it did at the time.
So I'm hesitating to comment on the performance because I agree it worked really well for us, but we're not exactly using. Well, it's hard because we are emulating it, so you'd think it would be slow, but it's also a very old OS, so it doesn't need that many resources, and we have gigs and gigs of RAM and huge CPUs.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, I know not everything is sort of one-to-one. Some of the animation stuff isn't quite so speedy, but I would say just navigating around the operating system and kind of jumping in and out of things, it really isn't all that slow. And I think maybe we should hold our tongues on that until we actually install OS 10.0 on our iBooks and really get a good sense of what that's going to be like. But I think Mac OS changed everybody's perception of what a computer obviously should look like and feel like. And I think that's for both the better and the worse. Because going back to OS 9, that operating system is really zippy. I think zippy in a way that OS 10 has never matched. And I know that some of that is not how OS 10 was built. To
make a metaphor that John Siracusa might make himself, it's a little bit like the end of a console cycle where, at the end of a PlayStation or cycle or whatever, you get these games that make the most out of the system, that squeeze every ounce of performance from the platform, and you get these astounding technical masterpieces out of it.
Yeah.
Now the next generation, it's on a new platform. It's got beefier hardware, and you can do pretty astounding things. But those games also tend to be a little clunky, a little rough around the edges, because people don't exactly know what they're doing yet with the new platform. And OS 10 feels a little bit like that, where it's like, this is obviously this is a crazy difference, like visually stunning, compared to OS 9, but also pretty rough.
Yeah. I mean, I think the aims are different too, right? We're talking about a different type of user experience where OS 9 was really focused on sort of speed, and if you know it, you're really good at it. OS 10 kind of luxuriates in giving you visual feedback for everything you do in a way that OS 9 didn't quite care as much about. And I think that's okay. It's just something different.
It's just something different. All right. Well, that's going to do it for September 2000. Too much?
Yay. Nah.
No, good? Okay. Fuck it. Yeah. If you want to hear more from us, you can reach out to us on Twitter at MemProShow, or you can send us an electronic message using the address memoryprotectionshow@gmail.com. Our worldwide web ring hangout spot is memoryprotection.show. Don't forget to hang out after the outro song to hear us talk about recommendations. This month, it's all about Best in Show.
All right, moving on to recommendations. Recommendations on the ones.
This month, an unprecedented event. Matt took the only good thing to talk about, so I decided I wanted to talk about it too.
The rare recommendation eclipse.
That's right. What are we talking about this month?
September 2000, not a great month, but one of the best movies came out. Best in Show.
Best in Show by Christopher Guest, one of the famous set of mockumentaries that he created with a sort of rotating cast of people.
Yeah. He's Second City people mostly, right?
Yes. So you got classics like Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara, Fred Willard, and many other familiar faces.
Yeah.
And what sort of sets these movies apart is obviously they're in a documentary style. It's a fake documentary, but they're mostly improv'd, which once you see them and see how good they are, it's pretty like amazing. So if you haven't seen it, the basic premise of Best in Show is it's about a dog show, a purebred dog show, and about the kind of people who bring dogs, and about the kind of people who breed, raise, train, and compete dogs in these kinds of shows.
Yeah, it seems like the premise of the movie was based on the hey, how come people look like their dogs?
Yeah.
And then Christopher Guest extrapolated that into an entire movie about people, their dogs, and the crazy lengths they'll go through to get them to win a dog show.
Yes, and it's very funny and heartfelt at times.
Sure.
Like I said, the movie's all improv. The outline for the movie was 15 pages long, and Christopher Guest, who plays one of the main characters, was it a Basset Hound owner?
Yeah.
He's the director, and he has a sort of a free-flowing style. He relies on his actors to be good at improv, and they are.
They're excellent, yeah. Christopher Guest also, starred in Spinal Tap, but I think that was sort of the origin of these mockumentaries. He didn't direct it. Rob Reiner did, and then he went on to do Waiting for Guffman. What are some of the other ones? A Mighty Wind.
For Your Consideration and Mascots. So the film had a budget of $10 million, and in the end, the box office take was 20. So doubled their money. The film was very well reviewed, and it's a beloved classic. What else is there to say? Register to vote, vote.org.
For real, though.
Go vote.
Please. End of show.